Hey everyone, welcome to this video and welcome to the episode 2 of how to make a simple video game. Now today in this episode we will be programming. To do programming we need a player and a ground in which our player needs to play. To do that, first let's go into our scenes. Here you guys can see the sample scenes. Just drag it into our assets. After dragging it to assets, click on the scenes and press delete. Delete it, we don't want this folder. And let's rename our sample scene to something like level 1. Level 1. Hit enter, click on reload. After renaming it level 1, we need to give a correct length and measure for it. To do that, first we'll create a player, 3D object, cube, or right click, 3D object, cube. Now it spawns in somewhere and the cube automatically needs to spawn under the directional light. To do that, select our cube. As you guys can see the transform here. Keep your mouse on the transform, right click, reset, and now our player is set to near the sunlight. Now let's rename it to something like ground. And delete this cube. Now we need to increase it wider and lengthier. To do that, let's give a x of 10 and a z of 100. After doing that, hit on F to focus on it. Oops. After doing that, hit on F to focus on it. Move it forward. Move forward using your arrow keys. And then let's move forward still. That's good. Now we can see that it's recorded in our game view. To see that in the sideways, let's drag our game view here. Now let's move our camera a little bit forward. Bit forward, up, and here. Now let's transform our player. To do that, again create 3D object, cube, and reset the transform of it. I'm just going to move my cube backwards a little bit and move forward. Now select our cube, reset the transform of it. Now select here. Let's drag our camera back, which is very lengthier, and even though we can drag our directional light backwards here in this position. We're just going to do Ctrl Z and focus on our cube here. Let's go back up, select our cube, move it up, go back, move it a good up, and let's set the directional light. It may be collapsing for you. You can set the directional light to something like the position of our camera, 1.83 here, 1.83, 1.83 here, to something like minus 29.9. 29.9. Enter. Now our directional light is at our camera. That's good. Now move our directional light forward here on F to focus on it. Move it a little bit up. It's still there. Now that looks pretty nice now. Now let's reset the transform of our player. Let's focus on the ground. Let's move it like this. Let's go forward. Let's go forward a little bit. Move our player completely down on the ground. And our main camera forward. And our directional light too. Move it up. And our camera here. And a little bit up. A little bit forward. Now zoom your game. That looks nice. Now let's exit from play mode. And then that little bit up. And our cube. Now it's okay. Now our player looks empty. Let's give a color for him. Now right click here, down in the project, create material. Where is the material one? Material. Rename it to something like player. And let's change the player's color to something like red. And just drag it into our player here. That looks pretty nice. And now any changes made in the material even affects the player. You guys can keep your favorite color on your player, but I'm keeping is that red, but just for a reference. Now I am just making my player move up. Hit play. Will the player fall? No, the player doesn't fall because he's just floating in the air and he doesn't have and contain any rigid bodies and components. To add a component, as you guys can see that it's in play mode and I'm telling the truth. Exit from play mode. Just leave it up. Click on add component. Go back. Physics. And add the rigid body component here. Now hit play. Our player must fall down because of the rigid body component, which gives actual feel to our player. And click on our player and press Ctrl D to duplicate. Duplicate again. Now the rigid body component is working properly. Now even I can show you without the rigid body component. I'm just giving. Okay, that's pretty enough for the now. Now let's start giving our player movements. To do that, let's go now. Let's write our scripts. Scroll down in our first. Let's rename our cube to something like player. Then scroll down. Click on add component. Scroll down. New script. Name our script to something like player movement. Name our scripts to something like player movements. Create and add. Excuse me, sorry. Now it really takes some time to add your player component or a player script into our game. I mean with the inspector of the player. After it added, as you guys can see the player movement script here, the script is grayed out. Just double click on it and it automatically opens in our IDE. As I said how to install it, what IDE you can use and what can be used to code in Unity. Now as we installed Visual Studio Code in the last episode, if you guys didn't see the last episode and if you are new, subscribe this channel and hit the notifications, like this video and share this video with your family and relatives. Now after this opens in your IDE in our Visual Studio Code, after it loads, now let's zoom in. Then after you click on your player movement, it just looks like this. Using system.collections and using the collections, the generic. The first two using tags are not useful for us, and just delete those. And gray our Unity engine, and this is very important, please don't delete this, it may cause an error. Now press on Alt and up. Now you guys can see the void start here and the public class mono behavior. Here we can add a public component in which our rigid body, as you guys can see, you can understand that in which our rigid body helps us to move the movement of the player. So let's add a short form of to the rigid body in which we'll be using it everywhere. Let's write public rigid body BRD and semicolon. Save it now. Go back into Unity and after it imports, sorry, I wrote rigid body, it's rigid body, control is to save it. Go inside Unity. After it loads, you can see that in your player movement script. Now it reloads. Scroll down a bit. Scroll down a little bit, and down you can see the rigid body component here, which is mentioned as RB. Now drag our player's rigid body in there. That's all. Now let's start making changes in our movement. Now just drag our player down. Now he's healthy in our rigid body component. Now let's try to add some force to our player. Let's something like write RB dot add force. Inside the add force, it can be mentioned in the three values, which is nothing but the x, y and z. Now the x, let's write something like 0 and 200 on the y and 500 on the z. Yes. Now please always press Ctrl S to save it or add, but the IDE won't save it automatically. You need to press Ctrl S to save it. Please press Ctrl S. Always, if you are in Mac, Ctrl E. Press Ctrl S. Go into Unity. Now that's okay. Now hit play. Now our player bumps up and moves forward. That's because the y-axis is set to 200 and rigid body force pushes our player up because of the y-axis, which is mentioned as 200. That's a higher value. Now the same thing we can write, just delete it here, and physics doesn't work in the void start, so let's write something like debug log, and we need to see that it also works in our console. Now click on log and semicolons, sorry, shift upper colon. Now write something like hello world. Hello world, control is to save it. Get into our game. After getting into it, after it loads, now you guys can notice it has loaded. Go to your console, click play. It has a good, it displays a message of hello world. That's now good. Let's clear it. Now you can see that the Visual Studio Code is also connected with our console. Now get into your IDE. Right. Now let's delete our void start, which will be not useful for the physics, and the void update, which is useful for us and which is useful and very useful in the physics components. Now let's run same command there, rb.add force. rb.add force. And inside the values of something like, oops, yeah, and yeah. Now that's useful. Now let's write something like 0 dot. Now if you write dot, I mean by, let's write the using Unity engine scene management, for example, using Unity engine dot scene management and close it with a semicolon. Now, sorry, management must be in capital. Now that's good. Now let's save it. Now if I write scene manager dot, scene manager dot, we can access everything inside our scene manager. For example, I'm writing AD attribute browse application pass, and as you guys can see that it adds everything which is in our scene management. It's not useful for us now. I just show you guys for example. Now let's get into our work. Now let's give something like 0 on the X, 0 on the Y, and something like 2000 on the Z, which makes our player bump up and move forward. Now let's multiply it into time dot delta time. The time dot delta time is used to maintain our time in a correct and conditional formatting, and what can I say? It transfers our time in a current position, or it checks that the time is currently good or not. Time dot delta time. Now that's good. Now let's save it. Now let's press Ctrl S to save it, and then let's write something like fix the update. It helps us really mess with physics. Yeah. And press Ctrl S to save it. Now see the improvement in our player's movement. Now it's importing. Now exit from play mode. Hit play. Now see. It goes forward and falls down. Guys, that's pretty much it for this video, and we have successfully completed our player movement. In the next video, we will be making our players arrow keys. You can input arrow keys, and you can control our player with your keyboard arrows in a conditional way. And after completing from episode 10, post episode 10, you guys can learn how to develop a game by yourself. Thanks for watching this video. See you all guys in the next video. Bye.